How's your day going?
Good. It's been very busy. I haven't had a moment where I'm not on a call or doing meetings or work stuff. So
And just to note, we are going live momentarily, so.
here.
All right. All right, we'll call to order this regular session meeting of the Park City School Board on May 17th at 3 p.m. To pledge of allegiance. And you would like to be sure.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Can I make a motion to go into closed session for the purpose, the strategy session to discuss pending and reasonably intimate litigation and to discuss the character, professional competence, or physical or mental health of an individual. Andrew?
I make a motion,
Oh, sorry, yeah.
yeah, to move into closed as right.
Thanks.
And yes.
Yes.
Yes. All right. All right, we'll go ahead. We'll move on to consent agenda. Can I get a motion to approve consent agenda that includes regular session minutes of April 19th, 2022, special regular session minutes of April 25th, 2022, closed session minutes of April 19th, 2022, accounts payable registers of April 1st, 13th, 19th, 22nd, 26th, 27th, May 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and May 12th of 2022, sex education, instruction, assurances, fraud risk management, Title III SSA, SO plan, travel requests, personnel information, April expenses and revenues.
I make a motion to adopt the consent agenda as read.
Second.
Perfect. Do we have any discussion? No, all in favor? Aye. That is unanimous. We will move on to employee groups. Hi. Morgan, thank you for joining us.
Hello, how are you?
Good. We know you have a busy week, so thank you for being
Okay,
here.
thank you. Good evening, everyone. PCA would like to welcome our interim board member, Mandy Pomeroy. We look forward to working with you. At this time, PCA is in active conversations and negotiations with the district regarding the licensed professional agreement. Those conversations are going well, and we are confident that we'll find solutions favorable to all stakeholders. Looking ahead to next school year, PCA, along with Dr. Gilday and Dr. Sorensen, are considering the pros and cons of additional workdays for teachers similar to the workdays used this semester. We would like to hear from all sides, and we'll be reaching out to board members in the coming weeks to discuss possibilities of similar workdays for 2022-2023, keeping in mind the legislature only allows these scheduled workdays for one more school year. PCA surveyed teachers for their opinions on these workdays. In the survey, 95% of the teachers stated that Flex Fridays, no meeting weeks, and workdays this school year were essential to their everyday tasks and made a tremendous impact on personal life balance, morale, and professional performance. Thank you so much for approving those days. The resounding positive feedback is partially what inspired continuing conversations with the district and school board on including these teacher supports for next year. Class sizes continue to be a #1 concern, and PCA will be in conversations with the DO over the summer as we all keep an eye on the student numbers. This last week, secondary teachers gathered at Ecker Hill for an overview of realignment plans in grades 6 through 12. PCA would like to advocate for continued elevated communication on the process and logistics as we move into construction in the next few months. Communication is a top priority, and we advocate for more throughout the process. The more stakeholders, including teachers, that can be involved, the better. The Park City School District Transportation Department and classified personnel are in dire need of support, and PCA advocates for an increase in benefits and pay for all of our classified employees, most especially our bus drivers. Without these employees, we cannot run a school district. As the end of the school year is upon us, PCA appreciates all the support and continued collaboration between teachers, parents, board members, and district office personnel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I am actually, come on up. Oh, no. Jen. And then I'm gonna have Heidi, so you're off the hook first.
All right. Thank you for having us today. I am here from Park City Classified Employee Association. It's a mouthful. And we are here, I'm here representing the bus drivers. They reached out to me earlier in the year. Mr. Sorensen and Mr. Tanner and I have met with them. I had 8 Friday meetings with them. I've been trying to signal the siren here that they are about to all take other jobs with other districts. And they did their own job study comparing salaries to all the other Western ski towns with the other comparable districts in Utah. And we are finding that their pay is below what other districts are offering. And then also we have the change in our local market. And only 2 of our bus drivers currently live in Summit County. Everyone else is driving from other counties where they feel like they could be being paid more money or equal, but spend less time driving, less on gas, wear and tear. They have a split shift. So if they're not living in Park City, they have 2 hours in the morning where they don't have anything to do, and sometimes in the afternoon. And they are advocating for themselves. First of all, they talked to Mr. Tanner and I both about how much they love working with kids. It was amazing to hear their backgrounds. I think we make some assumptions about people in transportation, and I think that it's changed. In the past, we relied on our local farmers and our moms to take these positions, and they aren't looking for these positions anymore. And so these are people that really, there are some of them that really like the split shift, that are looking, they have another position that they fill in, or they wanted to work just part-time, but because of our subbing issue in transportation, they all worked every day that they physically could this year. I mean, they really talk about working through hardships because they didn't have anyone, and they didn't want to leave their other bus drivers in a bind. Every day, the entire staff in the office is driving. So there are times where there is no one in the office to answer those phone calls or take care of emergencies. We are at a critical point, and if we lose anyone, it's going to be a problem. Just 8 years ago, we had 40 bus drivers and 9 full-time subs, and now we're down to 26 bus drivers and 1 sub. They were told that, let me go back. They also drive some of the more technical routes in the state, and they deal with some incredible traffic issues. It's a unique position in Park City, and they thrive on that. They enjoy it, but they feel like they deserve to be paid a reasonable, a comparable amount to what's stopping them from going to work at Vail. I mean, why should they stay with us at this point? We've talked about changing the RHTA. We've talked about looking at their, they wanted to renegotiate. We're in year 2 of our contract. They came up with all sorts of ideas. I think that Mr. Tanner has shared those with you. We eliminated their early out schedule on Mondays for the high school and Treasure Mountain Middle School. That resulted in a loss of pay for some of them. They were communicated that they were going to get a bonus, and that has kind of stalled out in our conversation, and they're really upset about it.
Do you have a list of what they're asking for?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can share that. with
Yeah, I
you.
don't have the list either.
Yeah, and I mean, this just may need to be a conversation that includes you and not just us working in the background. I would love to have the opportunity. They would love to have the opportunity to talk with you all.
We know what the hourly, like the study is. I mean, like any of that stuff is super helpful.
I have it all. I have all the other districts. I have I have it all. I don't have a clean copy of this one. I could get it for you.
Okay.
But I mean, these people already have job offers.
Yeah.
Look, I think we're all,
Right.
like, I think we're a little bit surprised. So let's,
Yeah.
Yeah. and
Well,
we're
I-
at action space, so that I think
That's why I'm
yes,
here.
and
I mean,
yes.
I am saying, like, this is red light, guys.
Okay.
Like, this needs to
we
be.
know how much the,
Yeah.
we know how, Shad, do we know how much we're talking here? Like,
The biggest challenge is comparing with the local market more so than even with other districts.
yeah,
And that's where we're looking at that RHTA. If it tripled, that makes it more comparable with transportation jobs in our region.
what's the RHTA? Is that the supplement that
Yeah.
Currently at 1,200 per
that's the
employee.
transportation stuff, like the commuting thing?
Yeah.
Housing.
Residential housing and transportation.
Transportation allowance.
That's in per contract.
And what's the,
Yeah.
so that's one lever that we can pull, is increasing that. And then the other one, what's the rough local comparison? for
Right.
wages.
It's kind of hard because we don't know where they're starting. So as Shad pointed out, when we did the comparison, we started at step 1 for Park City, although we really start all of our bus drivers at step 5. So at step 5, lane J, our bus drivers could start at 1964. Vail, Colorado, 2320, hiring max 2784, they can start at. Canyons, if they start at lane 1, step 1, 1950, South Summit's 1835, Jordan, South Jordan's 2103, Wasatch 2063. Wasatch also gives them an option if they don't need the health insurance, they can opt out of health insurance and get a $5 an hour bonus. I mean, that's really getting them, which, I mean, we've talked about it. We don't know how Wasatch is doing that, even at the state level. We're not sure how they're doing that, but they're interested. I mean, these are
What's
things.
the,
Right.
what's the high end of the hourly locally? So like, so you're saying we're starting at like roughly $20 an hour, and their ask is what? Are we talking $28 an hour? Do they have an actual formal ask?
They don't have a dollar ask, no, because we're not in contract negotiations. We were told that wasn't.
Right, well, what's like, if they're interviewing for other jobs, those jobs pay what? Like, are we talking?
Well,
$30
I think
an
a
hour?
lot of them are looking at Wasatch, which a lot of them don't need the health insurance. One of their spouses already has it. So that would start them at least $25 an hour.
Okay, so
And then they're not driving here. They're closer to home,
Yeah.
so they can spend their split shift, having lunch at home or.
what's the average hours that they're getting a week? Is it 20 or is it?
No,
30.
30.
30
hours.
Well,
And then-
it's closer to 30, but somewhere at 32, somewhere at 35.
32 average?
We hit up the RHTA.
The issue with the
The
healthcare
RHTA.
rate is where
Yeah,
it can
yeah.
That might, I mean,
And an
then
increase.
no opting out of it is part of the.
How many drivers you have? We have 25,
26.
26.
Currently.
That's right.
We need more.
So it's an education.
Yeah, as part of the overall budget discussion, we were talking about some strategies to increase not only wages for drivers, but also for our other classified staff. And we were looking at potentially RHTA as one of the mechanisms to do that, just because we're not in contract negotiation here. And that really would put more money where the pain's being felt in terms of transportation costs and housing in the local market. So that's one of the discussions we want to have with you during.
Is that a taxable benefit though? So like, is there any difference to, is it subject to payroll tax as well? So there's no difference if we do a pay hike versus other than it's a one-off? Is that?
It's a one-off on the contract, and it also is more directly targeted at the areas that we're seeing the difficulties and the costs. So,
As opposed to adjusting the entire
Yeah.
classified schedule?
Yeah.
But this is, I know that this is part of our bigger budget discussion too, so I just want to make sure that I know that this, but if you have more, I do know that this is a little bit like some of these discussions. They're gonna be coming up, right?
Yeah, and this isn't just, I appreciate Jen's advocacy.
No, I appreciate it, and I just, but I, right.
And we've talked a lot about equity in that, I mean, and when I can share the job study, it was interesting, the bus drivers eventually started looking at teacher pay. And our teacher pay is consistently one of the highest in the Western United States. And our ESP pay is low. And it's going to be a problem with how the market's changed, to keep people here and wanting to come here. It's not an easy position. If you can go make $5 more working at Vail at the ski lift, that sounds pretty relaxing right now.
Yeah.
So I'm just here to
No, I'm glad that you're
Thank
here
you.
and
Thank
thank
you.
you. And then we are having, I don't know if you want to stay for that or if you want to, but we are going to have a bigger discussion during our budget meeting. And then I know that there's a bunch of stuff coming up with the budget. So we'll definitely.
Yeah,
This will
Right.
inform
to have an
that.
opportunity
Thank you.
sometime to sit
Yeah.
down and to go through it with you all.
Yeah.
I know Ron Huggins from Transportation has really been, he's really spearheaded that and he's great at talking about it. So, and I want to thank Mike personally because he has been great at helping us out. And we've had a lot of hard conversations that have been really productive. So I think they're still here because of what Mike has done so far. So.
All right, we're off.
Thank you.
Right. Sure, I will do that. If you guys don't mind, I'm actually gonna bounce a little bit around and then Heidi, I'll have you up in just 1 second. But I know that there's a lot of you here and I want to bounce to the employee recognition. So this is a resolution recognizing the retiring staff members. It is appropriate for the Board of Education at this May meeting to recognize the outstanding service of retiring staff. Our district, as the conclusion of the school year, loses 8 staff members who will have served our children with dedication, love, and care. These fine staff members have served the education profession for the following number of years. From Jeremy Ranch, Lisa McInerney, 23 years. Susan Valentine, also from Jeremy, 23 years. From Trailside Elementary, Melissa Stockton, 19 years. From Edgar Hill, Joanna Russo, 14 years.
22 for me too.
I'm sorry.
Todd, make sure URS is aware of that.
Yeah.
That's what matters
Now
now.
I'm scared. From Tammy Schwalbe, I have 26 years. Oh, I don't know. Park City High School, Susie Graves, 30 years. Brent Boyden, 13 years. And from the district office, Paula Kruger, 13 years. The administration recommends the board adopt the resolution appearing as part of the board report and recognizing the years of excellent service. While the administration and staff is saddened at the prospect of these staff members leaving the school district family, we wish them all much fortune in the years of their retirement. Thank you all so much for your amazing service and what you've done for our kids in this community.
Thank you.
Thank you all. And I think Lori might, do you have something for everyone or did we?
Celebration. Did you want to say there's a
Perfect.
celebration on May 19th?
Yes, and there is a celebration on
Yeah,
May
so we
19th.
will be calling you out on May 19th at your schools in kind of a traveling celebration where you'll receive the honorarium from the district for all of the work that you've done and be able to have a few moments to celebrate with students and staff while we're all still here for the year. We're looking forward to that. So we'll prep you to do some pictures. And
Maybe we just.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we regroup on these years of service
Yeah.
and we'll get these
Right.
delivered to you guys just in
Yeah.
case any of them are wrong. So but thank you guys so much and thank you so much for coming this evening.
Yeah.
Do you want a
Thanks for
quick
staying.
picture of them standing
Yeah,
behind you?
Sure, that would be great.
Could we invite the retirees to stand behind the board?
Yeah.
I know, I'm like, well, generally we're gonna short anyway.
I know.
1, 2, 3. We'll do a couple more just for good measure. 1, 2, 3. Perfect.
Thank you. Oh my God, so fair. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, right. I know.
All right, Heidi, you want to come on up and join us now?
Well, that was just amazing to get to be a part of that. Thank you. I'm teary, and my friend Susie, gosh. I'm Heidi Matthews. I've met many of you, but I am here out of gratitude. And I'm a longtime Park City resident, Park City School District employee, big fan. All 4 kids went through here, learned many things along the way, and are just thriving and succeeding in life because of this school district and all that it has afforded. So I want to express my personal gratitude to you all for your support in the last 6 years that I have been serving as the president of the Utah Education Association. And whenever I introduce myself, I always say I'm a teacher or an educator serving in this role. And when I was first hired here, it was Treasure Mountain Middle School, and then it was the International School, and then it was the junior high, but it was all the same place. Been around for a long time, and moving into this role brought so many opportunities for me, and that I am just so grateful of having your support along in that path. It's been really bittersweet as I look at the next few months. Some of the work isn't always done. I hear Jen speaking about bus drivers, and we have retiring teachers, and our world is we're in a spot right now. We didn't get here overnight, not going to get out of it overnight. There's short-term solutions and strategies and long-term solutions. But also being in that position where no one's ever happy with what you do. And I know that you understand that. For me, one of the biggest decisions that we made as the Utah Education Association was to shift our focus away from having a convention. And that was a lot of name brand recognition. What's UEA? Oh, it's that weekend in October, right? And when we shifted away, we were listening to our people who said, we're tired. We love those 2 days, but we don't want to be going and having more professional development. We need to recharge. And I think that's what I am grateful for you is that you listen to the needs of your people, and that we are all on that same book of what's ultimately going to be best for kids. So the suite, again, is that opportunity to make a difference in public education. We've had some really exciting things that have been happening, and along the way, I've really learned about how Park City is viewed. The complexities that you face, like when the WPU goes up, that doesn't necessarily mean such great things up here in terms of funding. And I hadn't seen it that way, and I have an even greater appreciation for that. So I just, again, didn't want to miss an opportunity to express my gratitude, and just hope that I have represented you well. Thank you for your support, and I am so very excited to get to work in the Park City School District next year. So, thank you.
Thank
you.
Welcome back.
Yeah, we're excited to have you back, but thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Oh, I think Dr. Hutt is super excited to get up here.
I have a couple of things that I want to make sure, since this is one of the last board meetings of the year. We have a few things that we are obligated or mandated to be able to share with you as a board. So I'm going to address some of those things tonight. And they mainly focus around the services that we're providing for our multi-language learners. That's the new designation for what we typically would call our English language learners. So you may hear those terms interchanged a little bit. And then I'd also like to provide some information about our proactive efforts to support school-wide culture and climate as it relates to PBIS. So I'll explain a little bit more about that. Under our current statute, USBE actually conducts school visits during the year to provide commendations and recommendations with respect to programming for multi-language learners. So PCSD schools were visited in April. And we received feedback from the state regarding those visits. Upon receiving the feedback, it's our responsibility now to share that information with the board and then to describe some of our next steps with respect to some of the recommendations that were provided. So the recent report did some nice recognition. It recognized the board members and it recognized Dr. Gilday and district leadership. And I'd like to quote what they said: for their openness to address issues related to ensuring that multi-language learners have access to high quality instruction. Further, the state pointed out our programs such as Dream Big, as well as our PCEF sponsored Bright Futures and EATS. Those were all highlighted as promising practices and things to look forward to as opportunities in the state to serve and close achievement gaps. Some commendations were given to our many teachers. They went in and observed several classrooms. Teachers were commended for using evidence-based instructional strategies that are known to be effective for English learners. Specifically, the visits pointed out student discourse, deliberate practice, and integrating learning with prior knowledge. Some of the recommendations for improvement included goal setting around WIDA exam for students that are older in our 9th through 12th grades. There was also a recommendation that we should continue our efforts to ensure that Tier 1 instruction is intentionally planned and includes those strategies that we know promote access to learning for all students. Specifically, the report provided recommendations for professional learning and practice to support teachers who are learning to make learning accessible. It also talked about some opportunities to rethink how we question students within learning so that we know that they're learning at a deeper level. I'm really pleased to report that our T&L leadership has come to those same conclusions, and there were no surprises in that report. We've already begun the work that we need to address those gaps in performance that exist for our multi-language learners and peers. I want to point out that this is the reason that we've created and implemented our PCSD instructional framework, because there until now has not been a really systemic way for us to be able to have common expectations, support, and accountability for teaching and learning within the district. We're also reviewing and revising our alternative language services program. That program is something that's required under this same statute that outlines the services and programs that we provide for our English learners. We've begun that overhaul with our elementary grade level, and I know they're meeting next week to talk about some specific Tier 1 strategies that we are putting in place as soon as next year. And finally, we're implementing a more robust multi-tiered system of support at the secondary level and introducing some additional measures to be able to benchmark where our students are in terms of English learning and implementing small cycles of inquiry through PLCs. So I'm confident that we're shifting to a more systemic approach to supporting our English learners and making sure that we make learning accessible for them at the very first lesson that they experience. Second thing I wanted to talk about is that you may recall in the middle of COVID, so you may not recall in the middle of COVID, but that in the year 2021, Utah legislature passed a law that requires every LEA to have a positive behavior plan in each of their schools. So funds were actually provided through that bill to create and oversee those plans at schools. And you may have heard us talk about that proactive programming under the acronym PBIS. While many of our Park City schools actually already had PBIS programming in place, this first year of the state mandate has given our school leaders an opportunity to really work closely in horizontal school level teams so that we can consider how do we continue to create safe and secure climates within our schools. At the beginning of the school year, we assisted each school team to use a PCSD created template so that we could evaluate where was their current plan and practice. And now at the end of the school year, each of these teams have determined some important next steps that they will be taking in writing and implementing their school PBIS plan. It's important to note that most schools have decided that it's important that they focus on training staff to record data, because we recognize that in order to know how to provide additional support, we need to be able to understand what's happening with behavior in our classrooms and throughout the school day. So our school teachers and classroom teachers will then be able to help us understand and identify patterns so that we know how to adjust programming and instruction to prevent that kind of misbehavior. An essential aspect of PBI's programming is, of course, the use of incentives for students who are following school rules and actively working to build our school climate. I do want to share appreciation to our Park City Education Foundation because they help us prioritize the funding of those student initiatives, particularly because there's very little funding available for motivational items, and they are difficult to have approved under our budget. So PCF's been an excellent partner in providing our teachers and our schools with funds to purchase and to use student initiatives. In closing, I'm delighted to have an opportunity to publicly thank our teachers. This month, we celebrated our teachers during Teacher Appreciation Week. And we're also able to this month recognize our PCF excellent educators and of course to share our best wishes with our PCSD retirees. I know that you as a board truly recognize and appreciate the tremendous efforts of our teachers. I know you do, and I appreciate that from you. I'm personally inspired by the dedication that all of our staff members have to our students in our community, and my special appreciation to them all.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions about either of those reports or?
We were actually, Andy and I were in the schools yesterday and got to see the PBIs and a few of them, and it was awesome to see. It was great. So
Thank you very much.
thank you. Mr. Tanner, hot seat.
Good afternoon. It's, the operations update for the 17th of May, 2022. The COVID situation in the county is starting to heat up a little bit. We've changed into a medium transmission index status, still low by historical standards, but it is statistically starting to move up into incidence growth. What that means for us, there's no additional mask mandate that's imposed by the county at this point, but the county just recommends that you're at high risk for severe illness, talk to your healthcare provider, stay up to date with your vaccines, and get tested if you have any symptoms. So those are their guidelines that they're recommending. Again, there's no additional restrictions that are imposed on us by the county at this point. We are closely watching the situation in New York and China as those start to evolve. Our schools are seeing an uptick in cases. We have 19 total in the district right now, 7 which were new as of yesterday. And they're spread pretty evenly across the school, but we also do have 15 suspect cases, which we haven't confirmed through the normal channels. So the numbers are moving up. Our COVID nurse, though, who's doing most of the testing, is reporting that most of these are in unvaccinated children or kids who haven't had COVID before. And that's almost exclusively in those kids, which he's finding kind of strange, but very low on reinfection rates for kids who had it before, now are getting it again. All of our mitigation procedures are still in place in terms of hands cleaning, to air quality. We've got plenty of PPE at hand if things start to accelerate. Additionally, the FDA authorized boosters for grades or ages 5 through 11. It still has to go through CDC approval, but that's also on the way. The principals were directed to use common sense steps to limit density in closed spaces. We really haven't changed any of our end of year activities at this point. If things continue to progress to an accelerated level, we will. But we're watching closely for those signs. As the summer months progress and people are spending more time outdoors, that also definitely helps us a lot with the mitigation stuff. Trying to keep everybody focused. So we got 12 school days left here. Hopefully we can limp to the finish line and have the summer to regroup. But we do still have PCSD testing available for our students, staff, and families by appointment with Ben, who's a COVID nurse from 8 to 10 every day at schools in session. From a mobility grounds perspective, we worked with Todd to recalibrate the budget for capital outlay from 3 million back up to 4 million, even though our request was at 7. We were fortunate that it will allow us to complete the purchase of some buses and fill out our concrete and asphalt needs in terms of the regular maintenance throughout the district. The Eccles work that we were planning to replace a catwalk and a lighting mount up there on the second floor of Eccles is scheduled for 22nd of October and the 22nd of August through the 3rd of October. We were sure to conflict those with construction and with the Park City Institute's performances. Our server room is moving from the high school to the district office, and most of the legwork is done for that to occur. So that'll happen. The formal cutover will happen shortly after school is out. Our 2 RFPs that were out in the system for building plan and material inspection services are complete, and the contracts are awarded. And we're availing ourselves of the services of those contractors right now. The master facility plan is progressing in a timely fashion. Our team is working to meet the budget. We have Mocha here tonight to talk about some of the constrictions that we've put in place to make sure that we're on budget, and also about the bid opening that we just had for McCollum and Jeremy this last week. And we're having our Park City Institute scheduling meeting for next year will be held in a couple of days on Thursday. On the transportation side of the house, we got 2 drivers in the training pipeline. Our white fleet mechanic job description has been updated, and we're going to go to market for that 3rd mechanic that we've had funded for a year, but will be replaced this coming school year. Our office area flood restoration is complete with new walls, flooring, baths, appliances, break room, and a new lift that's installed as a result of the flood. It's a pretty nice work over there, and a nice renovation that was well deserved in the transportation office. Just want to remind everybody that we've installed the bus UV infiltration systems are now in all of the district buses. We plan, since it's already late in this school year, to return to space available transport next year, provided the COVID environment permits it. And the transportation operation manual is still under driver committee review, and we hope to release it prior to the beginning of next school year. Child nutrition service, John asked me to relate to the board that they had an extremely busy year for food service with very high participation because of free lunches for everyone. But they also were dealing with supply chain disruption, staff shortages, and they're looking forward to the summer for their staff to rest. Don, he's done just a fantastic job of keeping the morale up in the shops there, and he's always in one of the schools working there in the trenches with employees, and they greatly appreciate that. We do have some great equipment enhancements for him in the FY23 capital outlay budget, which will allow him to enhance the quality of food, the directives from the board for more scratch meals, lower additive meals, all those things that are created in-house. And just want to remind the board and everyone that the free meal waiver will end with the end of the school year. We'll still obviously have free meals for our free reduced lunch staff, but everybody else has got to pay. So that's a change for us. Human resources, Shad and his team are really busy this time of year. They filled so far 30 licensed positions and 2 admin positions for next year. We still have 24 to go though. So he's got a lot of interviews and a lot of processing that they're working through there. As we mentioned, we're going to have the bus tour celebration for 8 retirees on Thursday between 9:45 and noon, with the first stop here in the district office. HR has started preliminary conversations, as we mentioned, also with the Park PCEA regarding updates for the LPA for next year. Planning is underway for the convocation, which is the start of the year event that Dr. Joe puts on, which has been tentatively scheduled for August 11th. And we have been talking with Human Resources, Todd, Jill, the board leadership behind the scenes about direct and indirect compensation strategies that we might help our employees out with the current cost of living efforts. Recruiting efforts, of course, continue with Shad. It's just nonstop in Human Resources. On the security, we've got a few items there. We're still working with the design build teams to ensure that new plans address security needs within the buildings. We updated the availability procedures and contact information for all reunification sites, that if our kids have to get off site and then be reunified with the parents, that the alternate site is identified, that relationship is strong, we know who it is, we need contact information not to get into buildings. That's all been reworked. And our AED CPR training program was revamped for FY23. It's going to be school site based, and our nurses are going to be trained as trainers and administered for each one of the schools. And that's all I have for you tonight. Any questions?
That's a little bit.
Thank you.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Taylor. Zach, do you have an update that you want to give tonight? Or
I can just give a broad update
Okay.
of what's happening in student council. So student council elections have been in for since the last meeting. New people have been elected to the leadership, so student on the board, student body president, student body vice president, and all of those. Also, appointed positions have been interviewed and gotten into student council for all the ones who have interviewed well. And this week, there's a bunch of senior events for the seniors, and including prom, which is happening this weekend on Saturday, which should be fun.
And props for juniors and seniors, correct? All right. Thank you so much. And welcome officially to the board.
Thank you.
I know last week.
Great to have you here.
Yes, thank you. Superintendent, Mr. Burbank?
Thank you. As we approach the end of the 21-22 school year, we're looking forward to celebrating our class of 2022. Our students are looking forward to an enchanted garden prom this weekend, and their social media posts about that event are really compelling. If you get a chance to look at Instagram, they've done a great job inviting everybody in the class to participate. All of the activities leading up to graduation on June 3rd, it's really fun to be able to get back to the traditions, and then also this class has set some new traditions. So I'm glad that they're able to happen. We're hoping for wonderful weather and a great turnout for all of those things. In addition to celebrating our students, we also recognize tonight our 2022 retirees, and these retirees represent over 161 years of service to public education and to the Park City community. It's not an understatement to say that their absence will be missed as we move into 22-23, and we aspire to hold the values that they've brought forward to our schools each day during their tenure as educators, support staff, counselors, and coordinators as we move forward. We wish each of them an exciting next chapter and as they pursue their next adventures. As we approach the 22-23 school year and consideration of the budget proposal, there will be many ideas and suggestions that coalesce around the Park City School District mission, which is to inspire and support all students equitably to achieve their academic and social potential. Some of the ways that we realize this mission is to ensure that our students and staff feel a deep sense of belonging within the school setting. We cultivate belonging when we demonstrate a belief in the limitless potential for each and every student, when we remove barriers to access and opportunities for everything from academic content to the many incredible activities and athletic opportunities that exist for us here in Park City. Through a focus on belonging, belief, and removing barriers, together we move our system towards equity and excellence. We cannot have one without the other, equity and excellence, as we inspire and support our next generation of learners. Meeting the needs of each student so that they, like our members of the class of 2022, excel and make the world a better place is what motivates our daily purpose and intention. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will move on to master plan. Just looking at the time. we should- Hi,
Hi.
How are you?
Afternoon. Good, good. We're at a very important point in the development of the master plan and the 4 different schools. And I think Todd's gonna show a PowerPoint when it comes. So I want to talk a little bit about where we are for the high school and the middle school. And then we'll talk a little bit about the bid opening that we had and how that's coming together. We have found that as we've been going through and finalizing design development before they get too far into construction documents, that we do have some square footage issues, which are higher than they should be. And so we've been working with the contractors to bring those square footage issues into alignment so that we have a better shot at hitting the budget overall. So now I've said about everything I can say without the slides. Here we go. Okay, so why don't we go to the next slide? So on the high school, I'm gonna open this up so I can kind of see what's going on. On the high school, The master plan square footage that we put out in the RFP was 128,000 square feet. As we finished up design development, we were finding that the building was running about 149,000 square feet, which is obviously about 21,000 square feet more than we could afford, and more than we wanted to build in the first place. And so we have been meeting with the contractor for the last 3 weeks and the design team, looking at different options and working with the high school principal as well as Lindsay with your CTE programs and others. And as of today, we have reviewed a proposed design that reduces the square footage and maintains the functions down to 127,958. So what that does is that reduces a lot of circulation space, which was over the budget. It also takes a look at reducing some of the hallways in areas where we were going to try to use those as excess learning areas and pulls that a little bit more into line with what we had originally planned. So we've talked about that, we've looked at it, and everybody feels good about that. Just as background, the master plan construction budget is 44 million with an overall fixed limit of construction cost, which includes both, since these are design build, both the design services and FF&E at $50 million. And with the design development estimated construction costs, the costs were a little higher coming in because of the additional square footage. And we believe that now that we've got the square footage back down to a more reasonable number, that we should be closer to being on budget. As you know, the market conditions today are challenging. And so everything is up because of supply chain and inflation and other things, and we're trying to work through that. We will continue to monitor the progress of the architects, and we'll continue to work with them with regards to looking at any program creep, meaning that spaces get bigger than they were planned, and we'll continue to work to pull those down. We will continue to work on non-program scope creep. If something gets added that wasn't in, we'll make sure that it's adjusted and balanced. We have not gone to the point of backing off of any of the mechanical equipment increases, which has to do with your EUI numbers, which we had talked about earlier. So we're still carrying the lower EUI numbers, which is a higher mechanical cost. And we're trying to hold on to that without sacrificing program and trying to keep those where we're at. There will be some value engineering items that we will look at as we go through. But overall, we did give them approval today to proceed with the 127,958. Okay. On the middle school is a little different, and it's a little more challenging because we have a existing building that we're actually doing work within as well as adding on to. Over at the high school, we're actually kind of cutting a line, knocking down some things, and building a whole new building. So this is a combination of both new and remodeled space. In the master plan, we had identified about 60,200 square feet of new space that we were going to build in the 2 add-on pods for the classrooms as well as a gymnasium. And we were going to remodel about 44,300 square feet for about a total of 104,500 square feet. What we found as we got through the design development is that we were really close on the new square footage. We were about 61,000 square feet. So about 1,500 square foot was a little higher than where it should have been. But the big bust or the big hit to us was in the remodeled space. And what had happened there was that some of the circulation areas had not originally been thought through in the initial work, in the initial master plan. And so we've gone back and we've worked with them to move some things around. One of the things that we have looked at today was moving the gymnasium from building it out in the playground area to moving it over behind where the current gymnasium is. And so extending it down. So you'll be able to enter both the natatorium and the gymnasium now by going through a vestibule area, but not having to go through the rest of the building. So that'll be nice for weekend activities or out-of-school program things. The one area that we still need to work on with that is any kind of noise transmission, because the gymnasium and the cafeteria will now be next to each other. And so we'll work through some of those things. But that then allows us to reduce the design square footage down to about 50,000 square feet, which is good from a process standpoint. And then we were able to, by making those adjustments, save on having to remodel some of the existing corridors, which was able to reduce us down to about 51,000 square feet. So overall, the square footage we're looking at is about 101,000 square feet on that. So that's good news. The construction budget, as we advertised, was $25.8 million. The fixed limit of construction cost is going to come in around $29 million. And by making these reductions, we think we have a much better handle on getting those numbers. And so we did tell them today to proceed forward with the proposed design and try to work through some of those things. And again, on the adjustments, we'll do the same thing. We'll continue to monitor the square footage. Looks like I didn't change the 129. That should be 109,000, not 129,000, down in the black. It's amazing what you see as you present these things sometimes. But anyhow, these two schools, because of some of this adjustments, we're going to have a little bit of a schedule impact. The way we're trying to address that is that the plan for the middle school not affects where the pods are happening, so that will be able to move forward. We also believe that the contractor is still planning, as soon as school is over, to start with some of the earthwork and some of the demolition around the site. Same thing with the high school. The northern portion of the plan has not changed, so they'll be able to move forward with that early. And we'll still be able to start the demolition and start a lot of the earthwork. So while they're finishing the drawings, and it'll push back the bidding on the high school and Ecker Middle School, a lot of the work that you're going to see in preparation for that will still start on time. We're going to meet with them this next week or two and get a more revised schedule to see what that does to us towards the end date. If you remember, we were pushing to have the project finished around June of 2024. We might be into July, and what that will do is it'll compress a little bit of time that you'll have to get things set up. But we don't think that's going to be too rough just yet. We can go to the next slide. Now let's talk about, is there any question about those two schools? The reason I'm stopping there is that's one contractor. And then we'll move to the next one. So both Jeremy Ranch and McPullen had bid openings on Thursday of last week. And both bid openings, I'll kind of cover the actions together because they're both running simultaneously. We received really good bidders. We were all very pleased with the high quality and the industry leaders that were bidding on the project. So they're not some guy with a pickup truck hoping to build your building. They're all qualified subcontractors who have good track records and good background, and we're very pleased with that. The bids were all tight and competitive. And what that means is that the drawings were clear and they were able to get the information that they needed from the drawings and specifications to put together the numbers. The other thing it indicates is that they were able to, the market is being pretty consistent in the numbers that they're giving us. Rather than seeing high swings from one supplier to the next, the suppliers are providing pretty consistent numbers. The bids, when they came in, appeared to be within the appropriate range. Now, some are probably high and some are a little low. The contractor for both buildings is currently going through those bids and doing what we call scrubbing them. He's making sure that the bidders haven't excluded, say, paint. And if they have, then he needs to make sure that he's carrying it somewhere else in the budget, because their responsibility is to give us a complete building based on the plans and specifications of the bid. And so if one sub is not doing something, that doesn't relieve the general contractor from providing it. It just means he has to cover it in a different way, or he has to go back to that subcontractor and say, well, we do actually need electrical wires and conduit, kind of thing. And so we're going to be getting a preview of that on Friday, where the GMP is coming in on Friday the 20th. So we'll know more about where we're at on that. I do know that Todd Hansen has been meeting with them since the bid opening and looking at a variety of different things. So I think both projects are kind of following that path. So on Jeremy Ranch, just to kind of let you know where things are at, the master plan proposal was 27.5. the design development and the documents that were bid were at 27.1, so that's good. The cost that we're looking at is 10 million for the construction, and then the FLCC is at 11 million. So Todd, if you want to go next one. And then for McPullen, again, which is running a parallel track with regards to the bid opening and the actions, the master plan was 27.22. It was a little smaller in the master plan, but because we're trying to get a benefit of having the same plan, this one's a little bigger and the other one's a little smaller. So they kind of balance out and compensate because we get a benefit from having the same plan being repeated. And the contractor can use similar techniques and similar methods. The big difference between the two sites, just while we're talking about that, is really in the utilities and how we're trying to work around the utilities that are in different locations on the site. And so this one is up 27.150. Construction budget here was also a little smaller at right around 10 million. And then the FLCC is 11.2 million. And we'll have a much better understanding of where we are towards the end of the week. So we're still working hard to keep us where we need to be, and we'll stay focused on trying to deliver these on budget. We'll work with the contractor, see where we are time-wise.
Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just because of timing, should I jump to? Do we have anybody for public comment? You haven't received any? Oh, here we go. So, should I just wait? All right, let's go to the budget. Well, that's what I'm trying to, should we just do public comment? We'll do public comment. So if anybody's here for public comment, I need you to fill out one of these blue forms right here on the table and then give them to Lori, please.
Dr. Gilday, there's a woman who had something she needed to deliver to you out in the lobby, and she was gonna wait, but I don't know if she did, so it looked like it was some sort of acknowledgement or recognition forms. So anyhow, she was a little scared to come in during the meeting.
Let's just go here. Yeah.
I'm Josh. And that's his reaching person.
Sorry. Okay. Well, I wonder if that would. Yeah.
I wouldn't focus on the best. I go to watch you guys then.
So both of you guys, Josh and Chris, are speaking on behalf of the budget. So I can either have you come up, or we're about to go into our budget conversation and then hold public comment afterwards.
I guess I'd rather hear what you about the budget, so maybe that answers questions and things like that. That'd be
Yeah,
my-
I would too. Okay, perfect. That's why I asked. So we can always, we'll hold this and we'll go into the budget conversation, and I will turn the time over to Todd.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so,
You're gonna show it up here.
yeah, I'll just put it up on the
I
screen.
don't
This is
have anything
the-
else for the rest of it.
You go.
That's why I didn't know if they had any question.
Oh, I don't know.
No, sorry. Technical
No,
difficulties.
no,
We're
you're
good.
good.
All good.
All the other stuff.
All right, so just a high level overview of the budget. We're looking at a $96.4 million general fund budget, which represents a 3.1% increase over the final budget for the year that we're in right now, or about $2.9 billion. The majority of that funding is our compensation package, which has been the case for the last 2 years and will most likely be the case this year and next year as we move forward with that 4-year agreement. So that's the high level. In the package for the compensation, we had talked about the out years having a tax increase in order to support that commitment. So what's built into this is an $800,000 increase to the board local levy, as we had discussed 2 years ago. So that's programmed in, which will trigger a true taxation hearing in August. So when we have our board meeting in August, we'll have that tax hearing included on that day.
Is that like August 17th?
So it's typically what, the third Tuesday? So is that the 16th or this? Who's got a calendar?
You can keep going on. 16th.
16th. So it will most likely be the 16th. I've been in conversations with the county auditor who coordinates all of the tax hearings from the different taxing entities. And it sounds like it might be a year where several taxing entities will be holding tax hearings as well. We're typically at the tail end of all of those because we try to time it with our board meeting, but they can be as early as like the 2nd or the 3rd of August. But most of our patrons aren't back from their summer vacations, and so we'd rather have it as late as possible and allow everybody to attend. So that's the kind of the general outline there. The focus of our budgets are in these 5 areas: increasing academic achievement, providing safe school environments, attracting and retaining outstanding educators and staff, strengthening school, family, and community engagement, and ensuring fiscal operation responsibility. And so those are the lenses that we used as the different conversations came forward from the departments at the DO, as well as from the principals and those at the sites. We said, if you're in this range, we have a lot of room to talk and make sure that those requests make it through the process. We also have an eye towards the grade realignment. So we know you just heard the master planning that's taking place, and that will take the 9th grade, put it in the high school, 8th grade, and it'll go into the middle school sites. There's a lot more that goes than just building the spaces. A lot more programming and coordination, staffing, administration, all of those types of things need to be thought through. And we will be doing that. Task force groups have already been put together, and we're engaging in those conversations now so that we're ready when the buildings are ready. Proportionately speaking, our attracting and retaining employees is the biggest piece of our movement forward, at about 57% of the ask. Most of this, again, is the compensation package, but we also have some compensation enhancements that we'll talk about with regards to, of course, we heard about transportation. We have a piece in there for transportation, as well as what can we do for the balance of our employees as we go through this higher inflationary period that we've had before. So that's the general overview. As we go into our next school year, we're anticipating about a 2.2% decline in our overall enrollment. That's on track with the forecast that we've had. If you recall, Davis Demographics came in 2 years ago and helped inform our master planning process as to the size of the schools and the spaces that we needed. So this is in alignment with that presentation, refined obviously for projects that have actually come into play. So development projects, we're going to start this year, but then it gets delayed, or it's smaller, it gets revised, or the county or city has them redo their, there's all kinds of adjustments. But again, we're closer to this year, and so this is what we think we can anticipate in our student body coming. The capital budget is probably the next biggest piece. So when you look at the columns on the budget schedule itself, you'll see some big numbers starting to move. Most, if not all of it, actually has to do with the capital projects and bringing our master plan projects online. So it's not just ethereal thinking and planning. This is like, it's going to happen. So these are the 6 projects that are in the master plan and the funding that is set aside for those. Now, these numbers are different than what you just saw from Dave, because these include our costs as the owner of the facility. So we have costs that are incurred along with putting the buildings online. And these are the funding levels that we had bonded for, either through the GO bond or through the lease revenue bond. So that's why these numbers are a little higher, because we have our own costs to incur as well. And here's the general plan of financing for all 6 projects. 79 million coming from the general obligation bond. It's 42 from the lease revenue, and then we're using our own capital reserves to build these 6 projects. So as we look at what will the outlays be, fiscal year 23 is the largest year. That's where the most activity is happening. We have all 4 schools moving very quickly in that year. And then fiscal year 24, a year we will get to budget, but we already know what those expenditure patterns will be. You'll see that it drops off a little bit, and then we pick up Hartley's and Trailside at that time. So this is the ebb and flow that you'll see through the budget documents as we actually build the facilities. So looking at the general fund, what we're looking at here is we're anticipating about a 3.1% increase in revenue collections. It's being driven by an estimated 8.5% increase in general assessment growth. So you have valuation growth, and then you have the dollars that come off of that assessed valuation growth. So we're looking at around the 1.4. That also includes the impact of one of the RDAs coming to its conclusion in December of 2021. So there were dollars diverted through a TIF. Those dollars will now come to the school district. And so that's in that number. The legislature provided 6% on the WPU. So that's the bulk of the 1.8 million that we're seeing there. Another 600,000 within that 1.8 has to do with professional time for educators. This is, you probably heard about the additional up to 32 hours that they can put plans together and be compensated for. So this includes that money that's coming from the legislature. There's a little hiccup for us on that funding. They used a statewide average to compute the costs on a daily basis for a teacher. We're a little above the average. So we will come up short somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 on that. So we'll probably have a policy conversation at some point to say, is it up to 32 hours, or are we committed to the full 32 hours, and we'll bring the monies to bear to make that happen. So there's always fun with the legislature. It's like they have the greatest of intentions, but the practicality always comes to you to make this happen for our people. So that subtotal is about 3.3 million. There's a tax increase at the 800,000. And in balancing the budget, we will be going into the reserves about $1 million, a little over $1 million. So we have identified costs that are one-time in nature, so that we're not putting ourselves in an imbalance moving forward. So we've tried to match up one-time costs with one-time dollars to make this all come together. This is the page most everyone is focused on. These are the adjustments to the base budgets. I'm not going to run through this page this way. I'm going to go actually to the narratives, but this is a more detailed listing of the activities that we would propose be funded as we move forward. So I'll get into those in more detail in a moment. This is now the capital budget We already have a capital levy in place that generates revenue, so we're anticipating about 5.5 million from that source. We anticipate it will generate an additional 180,000 just from regular growth, so that 3.1% growth. And then the other revenue is what we receive is a mitigation payment from the remaining RDA with Park City Municipal. What is a note on this page, though, is this $991,000. Typically, the Park City School District does not participate in any of the capital funding formulas for the state of Utah. Our tax levies are too low and our assessed valuations are too high, so we don't qualify in any of the programs. However, this time they made money available to all school districts as they had additional money through what they call the economic stabilization account, and we weren't excluded. And so we're celebrating that we're finally on a capital list, and it came at the perfect time because we needed to finance these revenue bond payments. And so that is a great boon to us, and that will help out. So all of those sources, about 7 million, and then we have a revenue transfer. This is money coming out of the general fund side over to the capital side of the budgets to also support the beach revenue commitment that we have. So the overall projects are in these categories. So we have regular budgets that we make available to the principals on an annual basis to cover things that we didn't pick up necessarily in our regular capital process. So those are available to them. Then this is the breakout between safety, scheduled maintenance, sustainability, et cetera. Scheduled maintenance is usually the lion's share of these dollars. This is making sure all our facilities are safe and moving forward on a regular basis. We have our next cycle of one-to-one purchases on computers. We typically set aside about $1 million. The cost can range from $800,000 to $1.2 million in any given year. It just depends on what machines need to be replaced. And then this is our lease payment of the $2.8 million that we will conduct with the building authority. The detail of all this is also in the budget, and we'll get there too in a few minutes, but I just wanted to cover the highlights here. All right, so these are now the discussions about the different elements that we're proposing you consider for the FY23 budget. I don't know if you've already read through and you have some questions you want to ask now, or if you just want me to plow through and just kind of tee up each one for a conversation.
Do you guys have questions now? Yes, we have questions now. Andrew, would you like to start?
Yeah, could you go over in detail the compensation? So I have two questions. The first is around compensation increases. So there's a line item on here for I think 350 grand for admin, which looks like a inflation COLA increase. And then there's the line item for transportation, which is 150. And then there's the RHTA increase. So can we just kind of go over?
Jump there first.
Yeah, can we go over? So I guess, yes, it's bus drivers. So this is on slide 7, attract and retain employees.
Yep.
Bus driver is 150, admin 313, RHTA 950. Yeah. So
let's go through that.
Yeah.
You bet. So the first one, I'll just go down in the order, not in any priority. I'll just do my day showed up here. The bus driver and transportation staff increase. This is really a set aside, knowing that the conversation has been happening all year long. We've been aware of this and knowing that these are a hot spot within the district and need some attention. The details haven't been hammered out. So we've set some money aside saying, okay, it could be in this magnitude. Is it?
What is that? Do we know rough? I guess my question is on that. What's the rough percentage increase for our drivers?
So I think
at 150 grand.
Yeah, so I think we were trying to put numbers together that would represent something in that $5 an hour range.
Just 20 some percent.
Yeah, going from 19 to 24 or something like that. So that's kind of it's again, it's kind of a spitball number at this point because we didn't have the details, but that's the idea that could be there. Now, it's not the only thing that's being considered for our ESPs. So some of the other items will
That's
also,
RHTA.
correct. So that comes into play as well. So it's depending on how we want to hit this particular challenge with our transportation department. We can approach it from several different ways. We've left all the pieces in, and then they can be refined as to how you want to approach that. So this would be going into the salary schedule itself or some bonus program itself and try to enhance that. Those are ongoing dollars that we would carve out on this particular item. So that's where that's coming from. Again, we've had different feedback from the drivers themselves. There's been different ideas as to what seems appropriate, what doesn't seem appropriate. So that's our way forward.
Yeah, but I guess what I would be curious to see is whether or not the combination of that increase as well as the RHTA satisfy their ask, or if we're still short, if we're short, how much? So that would be a follow up on that line item.
Absolutely. The administrator salary scale adjustment, we've had challenges in hiring administrators into the school district. And so Shad went out and did a short comparative analysis of administrator salary schedules here locally within the state. Kind of like the Canyons, the Wasatch, those that our administrators would be attracted to.
Can you clarify administrators too, where that money is going to within?
So the administrator salary schedule includes building administrators, so your principals, assistant principals, and district personnel that are at the department head level. So that's that population. And so this was just an analysis going out and saying how competitively are we positioned against those districts, because that's usually where we watch our people go to.
And these are the current administrative positions.
Yeah,
So that doesn't
it's our
include
current
the
administrative-
additional administrative positions.
Correct. This
Okay.
is current staffing, current schedule.
Okay.
And so the pricing here comes out in the analysis that the entry level years, so the first year or two, were fairly competitive. But as you go through the salary schedule, they advance quicker than we advance on our salary schedule. So we have a salary schedule for administrators that had longevity incentives in them. So there were small increments for about the first 5 years, and then year 5, there's a significant change. And then there's smaller increments for the next 4 years, and then the 10th year has a large increase into it. So that's a strategy that was in place, has been in place for a while, but it makes a difference when you start to look at the salary schedule entry versus where are you 10 years from now. And so we are not as competitive as you move through the schedule. And so this was looking at the schedule, trying to improve those latter years. What can we do to improve that situation?
So these are all admins other than the two guys, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So
What, do we know what percentage that is roughly?
I want to say, so it's probably $10,000 on a $110,000 salary. So less
10,
less than
9%.
Yeah.
And we're looking at 22% for classified.
Well, this is just admins. So
Yeah,
No,
I'm
no.
saying, I'm just.
He's just comparing, yeah.
So that's the concept behind those. Again, that's looking at the marketplace and addressing the challenge that we're seeing and being able to hire into those administrative positions. The jump down now to the RHTA.
Yeah.
So the RHTA that stands for Rural Housing and Transportation Allowance. So this was introduced to the district several decades ago. It's been a piece of the compensation package for a while. And its intent was to recognize that individuals who don't live in the area have an additional cost to come into the Park City area to work. And those who live here have higher housing costs in this area. And so it was built in to accommodate for that. As we're hearing the concerns about living expenses, the impacts of inflation, the RHTA felt to be the most closely aligned piece of compensation to those issues that are arising. And so the proposal in this particular line item would be to take the RHTA and to double it. Now, there's some conversation as well that it could be tripled in order to address those types of costs. The RHTA is $1,200, go to $2,400 on a doubling, and $3,600 on a tripling. So we're probably in those like 10+% increases.
And this number represents all classified.
So that's all employees who participate in the RHTA, which are teachers and ESPs, but not administrators. Administrators do not receive that allowance. So, and also knowing that we're not in technically a compensation negotiation year, the funding for this is coming out of reserves. So it's a one-time basis. It can be used for this year and next year. There's enough money in reserves to walk us into the year that we have a full-on negotiations and determine what the right sizing of that should be and what structure that is, whether the RHTA is even the right place in the end, or is it really the schedules themselves and need to be adjusted in some different fashion. This doesn't have compounding to it. Usually the discussions around negotiations would like to have changes that allow for compounding. So 1 year increase builds on the next year's increase. So this is kind of a stopgap measure as we move forward. We have the available reserves to be able to do something on this kind of a basis.
So I know you said to double or to triple. Where do we stand with that? Do we have the ability to triple it, right, for the one time?
Yeah, so doubling is 948,000.
Okay.
Tripling would be that number again, so 1.8 million. We have uncommitted in the budget at this point about 2.6 million of excess reserves. So there is headroom to go to a tripling, but I don't know that you could do tripling 2 years in a row. So that's kind of the balance.
So we can double 2 years.
You could double 2 years in a row. It gets tight as you try to triple it 2 years in a row. And so that's a consideration. Again, this addresses specifically the cost areas that are impacting our employees, and it gets it there in a very succinct, simple way, as opposed to redoing and trying to renegotiate the whole salary schedule.
Does anybody have any more questions on that one?
I'm just trying to see
Yeah,
what it
something
looks
like
like
that.
for us. I do want to make sure you explain the educator professional time, because that's the delta between what the legislation is providing and what we need to provide for us. Or is this the whole number?
No, yeah, so that number's not even in the budget right now.
Okay.
Because I was at a training last Thursday and discovered that, oh, that's how they're going to fund it. And so I ran my numbers and said, oh, I'm going to be off about $60,000 to $80,000 if the determination is to max it out at 32 hours. The legislation is up to 230, so we can move it up to however many dollars we receive from the legislature, or we figure out how to make it go to 32 hours. And again, that's a policy direction that you want to give us. The next piece that's on there is the $80,000 not related to educator professional time. This is looking at our substitutes and trying to address how we can incentivize them to be more available. So this is an idea that's been run down in the valley. A couple school districts have done this and found that it's been helpful. And what it is that there is incentive pay for serving as a substitute for multiple days. One district does it within a time period, and another one does it consecutively. So if you're available, you make yourself available, say 5 days in a row for substituting, there's an additional $50 available to $500 by the end of the school year. So there's something to encourage availability. We already have you on the list, but it's usually saying, yes, I'm available to come that day is the challenge. And so, yeah, this 80,000 is built around that kind of an idea. If we could incentivize up to an additional $500 in the school year on some basis for those substitutes to come and meet with us more often.
Is that enough? Like, so Dr. Sorensen, you know, it seems like every time we hear about HR, there's two groups that come up, bus drivers and substitutes. The bus drivers, it looks like we're addressing, or we're attempting to address relatively aggressively. The substitutes, it looks like we're, you know, doing something, but it's not as aggressive. What are the thoughts on that?
Again, if you're comparing with the local market, we're not being very aggressive at all. So if a substitute's going to sub or they're going to work somewhere else in Park City, we're not competitive. If we're looking district to district, we are competitive, especially if you put the incentive pay. So that's where it becomes very unique for us here in Park City. In education, we typically use our peer groups in other districts in comparison, and now with our neighbor markets, the local region, we're going to have to shift that thinking.
Yeah, so I'd be curious what like
An
the,
aggressive approach would
yeah,
like.
what the aggressive number would be. I mean, to me,
Yeah.
that's such a critical role, not only for maintaining the education of the kids, but also when we're looking at trying to help attract and retain teachers, you
And
know.
you have to ask yourself, where do we value a substitute? Do we value them as a checker at a grocery store? Do we value them fast food? Because that's really where some of these individuals may choose to go rather than
I
substitute.
mean, to me, we value them as the educator. So, I mean, that's my
I agree.
I mean, because they're tasked with teaching and keeping our kids safe, which is more important than some of the other functions you mentioned to me. So I mean, that's something I'd love to see is
Yeah.
the difference between the most aggressive and where we're at today with regards to subs. I think to be, we've been hearing about both of those, bus drivers and subs, for years. I'd love to address both of those as aggressively as we can.
Do we feel as a board comfortable with going beyond the $800,000 that we planned for a tax increase to try to do some of these things? Or are we wanting to shift things around that have been proposed to try to secure additional
I
dollars?
don't think we know necessarily yet. I think we'd like to see what the difference is in these different line items, and then we can either prioritize or increase the number.
Yeah.
Like to
For me,
see-
that'd be helpful to see.
Totally, what a tax increase would look like and what rearranging would look like, with the adding an aggressive approach.
And I think the reality is the climate has changed since our initial thought of
Yeah.
going into a tax increase when we
Yeah.
started with negotiations 2 years ago. I mean, the world's kind of shifted quite a bit anyways, but I agree.
Yeah,
It
but to
would be
me,
really,
I
it would be
think,
helpful to see.
to
the-
me, I think there's nothing more important than taking care of staff. Included, you know, whether it's, we're talking about classified increases, teachers, subs, admin. I think it's all, for me, is priority one versus adding new positions or other expenditures. That's where I would say.
Can I ask a question and then related to bus driver, like hopes and dreams? Doing very rudimentary math. $5 an hour increase at about 35 hours a week, okay? That is about 175 a week. At 25 weeks, about,
We have 36 weeks of school.
okay, so I did that wrong. So this would be and then adding an RHTA at double. At 25 weeks, it was about $7,000 increase for a bus driver. Is that anywhere near? Are we looking
Getting
at
up on
what you were, okay?
Right.
All right, my next question, do I get a second question?
You've been cut off. Yeah, look,
Well, no,
we're gonna
does
second
someone else
question.
want to have a
No,
question?
does
for-
any- well, I've been asking. Andy, are you good?
Yeah, no, I'm good.
Does anyone else want to do another question for me? So my other question is on the safe school environment, the 3 line items there. I'm well aware of the importance of the internal compliance coordinator in the Title IX. And I think we've done an exemplary job without having someone full-time on that. So thank you guys for keeping us in compliance. The other 240,000 for DEI training materials, I guess my question and a DEI inclusion position. I guess my impression was that we were going to have that responsibility within the CAO. But I guess my question is, when I see DEI training materials, the 2 things I'd say is 1, that's kind of a hot button issue, which I think is pretty divisive even in our community. And 2, I think the state governs what kind of training we can do in DEI and provides a lot of that training, right? So I guess my question on the 100,000 is, why do we need this above and beyond our, state available training, which we know is legally compliant with USBE standards? And the second question is, DEI inclusion position, can you talk a little bit about how that looks within the construct of forming policy and guiding academics, and why that's a significant ask over some of these other things?
I think the position, first of all, is not defined exactly. And I wrote this down as a question too. These funds that were put in there as line items, how they look based on the current posting for the CAIEO, but that we're actually with tomorrow's meeting, and that we'll have an updated report on what this actually looks like going forward. Coalition is kind of stepping back and looking at what makes the most sense for this position. So the posting that you're referring to from the last update, there's been some change, there might be some evolution in that and what that looks like. The Title IX, from what I understand, because of the recent training, it's very urgent that there's.
Yeah, I mean, that one
that
seems
was
non-negotiable.
really
I guess where I'm coming from is,
the training and
You're just looking at
materials,
the
I
training and
think,
the
are
inclusion
more.
position. Are they 2 that you have concern? Because I would
Yeah.
agree, the Title IX, understanding the changes. and
I'm not,
stuff,
yeah,
that
I
one
think that one
okay.
is, I would put that at level 1 in
Yeah.
terms of alongside the pay increases. I think having a position, I mean, where I come from is, I think equity is part of everything we do, every decision we make, the culture of our district. I'm proud of the work that we've done from an equity perspective. I'm proud of where we are with special ed, for example, with our Latinx community and being in compliance. And that's not to say we can't do more, but I guess where I get worried is that we're putting a $240,000 line item on an additional administrator role that is going to be extraordinarily controversial, when I think, for example, Dr. Hunt did a great job in leading, that equity conversation in her role. So, I mean, I think that's what we need to weigh is, can we hire someone in the CAO role who can also look at the world through an equity lens and lean on the state for some of their training for this coming year and take some of that money, but I'm open to understanding
I think
what
the
the thought
coalition,
is.
So one of the ideas where it says DEI position, that particular role, the thought was that you would, so the proposal was basically you would have that academic officer doing exactly what you said, Andrew. Everything, they know the calendar, they know the state required trainings, they know how to, integrate all of that, because if things are not interwoven, they're not going to move, right? So that's the cabinet level. Then this idea of this DEIB position was really more of just like our instructional coaches The idea was if there were to be any sort of incident, right, you have somebody trained who can be alongside that administrator and that teacher in that classroom, can work through the restorative process, can help coach the teacher, can help coach the admin, you can really kind of help keep our eyes on, what haven't we seen? What have been our blind spots? And that would be the educator level, right? So you'd have somebody at the cabinet, you'd have somebody at educator, and then this Title IX investigations as they occur. Those would be staff, it's a staff sort of level where it's a very consistent incident documentation, being able to give you data and reports, as well as the important compliance paperwork that needs to be done. So the idea was you'd have a team basically that works alongside everything so that it's not siloed. Because to have just a DEIB person, either reporting to student services or to HR, but not necessarily fully integrated into the system itself, doesn't actually move anything. So the idea is both proactive, and reactive to what those incidents were in February. We don't want to really see a repeat of those, but we also want the school, if something happens, any school, to have that support and then to help the teachers, because this training that is state required for both harassment, bullying, intimidation, threats, as well as equity, and including the definition of equity in Utah. It is robust, it's heavy, it's 10 modules like each. So again, when you're looking at some of the training and materials, it could actually just be some of that sub time when we need to pull a team out to make sure they get, the appropriate state.
So what's
And
the-
Dr.
what's the-
Gilday, is that, sorry, can I just clarify
Yeah.
something for you, Andrew, where that, I think these coach and compliant, the training materials and the DEI position came from the coalitions, as Dr. Reynolds presented to us, every subcommittee recommended that, right? And so this came from members in the community or in the district that were looking for some more guidance in this area, staff. So on.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder though, I guess my question is,
Yeah.
is like, how many spots do we add year one and look at, I mean, like, what is the role of the compliance coordinator and Title IX? Can that be a compliance role as well as a coach? Or, can other people, because, I mean, in theory, if we believe in equity, we want that to be in every building. We don't necessarily want that to be someone sitting down the hall from Jill, whose job it is to create local policy that in theory helps children. Like, we want it to be someone who's dealing with issues and coaching educators on how to make sure that all kids feel welcomed. But that's, I think it's also kind of a slippery slope, right? How we address that and who's doing it.
And I think the idea is this coalition, it was helping inform that. And Dr. Gilday and Dr. Reynolds came and had that previous presentation and how that plays out. It was clear that not putting any money behind it didn't feel right. Behind and a position that could help bring it all in together. Engaged with the academics, with Dr. Gilday, and then have on the ground the coach going through the different areas where equity is, it is permeated through everything. But if you don't have somebody who's held accountable to making sure it shows up in all areas, that's what.
Yeah, I mean, I guess
feeling.
I guess I want to see more, I want to see this idea more fleshed out, and I want to understand why, for years we've been trying to get more administrative dollars behind our Latinx community, which is our real diversity here, not to minimize any other groups, but I mean, that's a major portion of our population. And, I think, I worry that we're getting into kind of throwing dollars behind a national trend, which is going to be, which may or may not help, and which is somewhat, abstract. So I guess I'm happy to learn more about it, but I think my initial blink would be that, I'd much rather take $240,000 and give it to substitutes so they actually come and our teachers can have breaks and planning.
Well, maybe you could talk to some of the coalition members
who are represented from the Latinx community and others who.
Yeah, and again,
suggested some of this. So I
yeah,
think
and
there's
again,
a lot of
I've
work
been
that's
I've been
done
asking
behind
for
the
that.
scenes.
I think it's more the title that scares me.
Yeah, that's fair.
And that's why I'm asking for more concrete, what's the job
What they'll
description?
do.
What is their role? Who do they
We're
report
working
to?
Yep.
What is the DEI training materials? Again, if we're talking about paid professional development time, then I think that should go into professional development and be at the discretion of the CAO. You know, if we're talking about something else, then I'd like to know what that is because I'm not necessarily comfortable with that direction.
That's right. Makes sense.
Okay. And I know you guys have a meeting tomorrow, just to kind of circle back. I know you've had some thoughts and discussion with Dr. Sorensen as well about some ideas of how to structure certain things. So I know you guys are going to try to flush some of that out tomorrow, maybe a little bit more, so that you can come back and give us a little bit better of an idea.
Yeah, I think the idea was that the coalition would only be every month, every board meeting doing these kind of updates. You can ask these questions. That's moving forward. This is the one meeting that didn't have some. Doing that because we're in a.
But
Yeah.
but this is
Talk about
important because it's part of the.
Yeah, exactly.
Who's going to be leading that going forward?
That's gonna be part of the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think we, you know, we definitely want to flush that out and get the community comfortable with it before we start to. Get down that road. Those are my two questions.
Those are yours.
Yep.
All right. Andy, do you have any questions?
So I'm gonna got a real good lowdown last week. We talked, I'm good.
Okay. Wendy, do you have any?
I don't have any more.
I think, I just want to make sure as we're looking in here, feel like. I don't know where we are. I mean, I know that just to address it, there's been a lot of conversation about where we sit with the structure of our classrooms for next year and where that's at. You know, that I think understanding some of the budget and the narrative that's actually necessarily out in the community is 100%. So Todd, can you kind of walk us through that a little bit more?
Or someone gave me a heads up that that question might come up. So I put together a little slideshow here. And so this is really rough, but it's the main steps of the process we go through in determining FTE allocations at each of the schools. I've pulled up just one school to be the example, but the pattern is the same for all of our schools. So where we usually start is looking at the history of enrollment. So enrollment is really the core of what we're looking at. And the methodology that we use is called the cohort survival rate plus development. So what that means is a cohort is, let's say in this example here, we have last year's kindergarten class. They become the next year's first grade. So first graders become second graders, fourth graders become fifth graders. So that's your cohort. So that's where you start. You just say, what did you have this year? What is the starting point for the next year's class? And so we do that actually by grade level at every school to determine what that cohort is. Then we use statistical analysis to determine when that happens from kindergarten to first or from first to second. What is the ratio of those students actually making it from the first grade into the second grade still in our system? And so there are statistical ratios that we use. And then we also, on top of that, we also look to see what developments are coming online as best as we can determine. And that takes us from the cohort column, run through the statistical analysis, and that gets us to our projection. So that becomes the numbers that we look at for the upcoming school year. Now, these numbers hopefully are somewhat familiar because this is the same forecast that we used back in November when we're determining opening of those schools. So it's really that data set that informs opening for those schools, as well as what will the school sizes be and class sizes be for the upcoming school year. So that's the get-go, is that statistical analysis. We do a sensitivity analysis as well to say, well, how reasonable are those numbers? And so I run through scenarios that take in different variables, and there's a high and a low that I use to kind of bookmark where this could go. We also have 2 demographic studies that the first one was done several years back. We're starting to get to the end of that study, and we're into the Davis study now. So I take those studies and update them for current information and put those out there as what would the demographic analysis tell me. And then the State Board of Education, through what's called the Common Data Committee, also makes a projection for the upcoming school year for our school, our district as well. And that's what they use for their funding formulas. So I look to see, this is what our statistics are telling us. Are we out of whack? You know, how are we crazy? What's going on? So that we take a look just to make sure we're in a reasonable world in looking at those forecasts. And then we sit down and we break out the classes now. Now we have guidelines that have been in place for a number of years. So we have a 23-to-1 guideline for our elementary schools and 25-to-1 guideline for our secondary schools. So it's just a place to look. You know, at those ratios, we start to ask questions. If we're way below that, we ask questions. And if we're way above that, we ask questions. But if we're close, we just move on. That's the analysis that happens. So what we do is we actually take the October 1 counts from the year we're in right now. So those are the actual student counts. We take that forecasting by the grades, and we determine how many sections there are of the grades. So this is 4 sections of kindergarten, first grade, second grade, etc. And we look to see what is the average class size. How far away are we from that, in this case, 23-to-1 ratio. And that starts to inform our staffing decisions for the next year. Do the same calculations for the estimate year to determine, okay, what will those class sizes look like? We are in declining enrollment, so there's extra pressure budgetarily to keep this really tight, because we will have fewer students generating fewer WQ dollars. So we will have less available in compensation monies for staffing. So we keep track of that. Go ahead.
Sorry, I mean, I know that we're forecasting, so I also know, like, we have close to 1,700 students who have families who have not registered, right?
I'll get to that.
Okay, all right.
I'll talk about,
Okay, sorry.
yeah, there's an ebb and flow to this conversation. So this is the initial look at how we put things together. We have an extra complexure in our district in that we have a number of DLI schools. And DLI class sizes are directed by the state in the model that we follow. And so here on this page, I pull out the DLI and get to the non-DLI students. So how big are those classes going to be? And does that trigger any need to make sure that we have staffing for non-DLI classes? So we do that ratio again, going back to the 23-to-1, or if it's secondary 25-to-1, to say how far away or how close are we to those ratios, and will that cause us to think differently about the sections we're offering. Here's the kind of the history of the projected versus how we track this over time. So this is the 22 school year. Of course, I lost all the schools off the edge of this chart, but so these are each of the schools, and we do check in October 1, January 4, April 1. We go in and say, what's happening in our school? Did that forecast cause us to change staffing in the course of the year? We'll have it graphically represented up there as well. So typically our forecast is a little higher than what the actual experience is in the school, which is good or bad depending on how you look at that. But that's our typical pattern in looking at that. But we do check in. I mean, we're monitoring. We know we hear back from the principal saying, hey, 6 more kids showed up today. What are we going to do? So we have those conversations. So this, Aaron, will get to your question. So here's kind of the timeline of how the information gets to us as we look at enrollments as people are registering. You all know the process for early open enrollment. That starts in November, runs through the 3rd week of February. The law just changed, so the timing will be a little bit different for this upcoming cycle. So we get that information. So we know the people who would like to attend our school. Those are become a known quantity. And then we have to give notices out in March. We also have our preschool registration. So as you recall, in all of our buildings right now, we have spaces dedicated to preschool. So we need to know what those sizes are, and will those class spaces become available for the upper grades, or do we still need to retain them for the preschool registrations that are happening? So we have that conversation to make sure that we're right sized as we offer our preschool. Then we have our new student registrations, and this year elementary and secondary started at the same time, and they start now, and they run. It's going to run all the way through till we start the school year. And this is where the ebb and flow starts to come. Is we are getting registrations, they're coming in, we're keeping track of them. The challenge is on our exiting students down this low down here. You don't normally hear from our families that are leaving until they're already gone. And we actually say, hey, we have you on the roll. Are you here? We've got you. Are you coming?
And we hold on to those students for 10 days, is that correct?
So by state law, we have to drop a student who doesn't report to school for 10 days in a row.
So it doesn't matter if they registered or not for the next year. You have to hold on to them all the way through August and start of school the following year.
Yep.
Okay, so I don't register my kid, but you're keeping my kids on the list until 10 days into the next year.
Because we also have a responsibility to report exiting of the system.
Also, if you go on vacation for 10 days.
Yeah, so those numbers you had up for Jeremy, for the projected class sizes for next year, those are with the students who you are anticipating. We don't know if they're going to register or not. No, it was the ones right there, those ones, the class sizes. So let's look, for example, at the 1st grade class, you're anticipating 18.3 students, and that's with the ones that haven't registered yet.
So this has nothing to do with actual registration. This is taking the current enrollments, forecasting them into
and just
the
carrying them all over.
And if that forecast plays out, this is what the class size could look like.
Tends to be pretty accurate, like the forecasts are.
Yeah, what the challenge really is when we're above let's do the elementary scenario. When we're above the 23-1 and we're getting to 25 and to 26 and we're still in the summer and we know more people are going to come, we get to 27, we get anxious. We at every level, we're anxious watching that because we don't know quite yet who all is exiting. There could be one student or no students exit. So we really have a class of 28 or 29. That's not acceptable. And so we'll need to put some remediation in place so that doesn't happen. But at this, like today, it's hard to know because we don't have the whole story. As you see here on the timeline, we don't have the whole story yet. We have part of the story, which is great to know who's coming in, but we got to figure out who's leaving the system. And we check in on that.
And you also anticipate that in the budget. You guys hold what, a few FTEs
So
if we need to
We
pull.
hold dollars.
2 more teachers.
So,
I think it's at least 3 to 4 more teachers,
So
yeah.
So this is what we do when we start to get into that. Oh, we have 26, we have 27. What do we, because if you're at 23 and you cut that in half, like
Yeah.
you make 2 classes, then you have 2 classes of like 12 kids. And that's like a problem on the other side. Now we're so small in that arrangement that financing is a problem. appropriate groupings are hard to put together. So small is a problem and big is a problem. So we're trying to find that sweet spot. So what we do is as we get through the enrollment process and we're looking at this as we go, we may have, so we saw Jeremy, but there may be another school in the system that's not experiencing the growth that we had anticipated. So systemically, we're looking at, okay, what is going up and what's going down. It may be that another school has enough decline that we can't support the number of sections we thought they would have. We really don't want to let teachers go. That's like the last scenario that we want to get ourselves into. So we will hold on as much as we can and say, okay, we thought you were going to be at Jeremy. We're going to need you to go teach over at Parley's now because the student counts work that way. And so we'll go through a reassignment exercise and get the current teaching staff into paid positions. We hold on to them. They're hard enough to get, don't want to lose them. Which gets us to that last thing on preferences. We'd rather hire in August than terminate someone in September. It's really hard on the individual. If you go hire them because you think the numbers are coming, and then you find out they didn't come, and you have to let them go because you can't finance it. That's terrible for everybody on all fronts. Yeah, mostly for the individuals who thought they had a job and now they don't 3 months later. So we wanted, that's like in our book, that's the worst case scenario. So we do everything we can to avoid that disruption because it not only disrupts the classes because you have to realign the classes, but now you're disrupting the teacher and their future potential of teaching. So we go reassignment. We hold on to dollars in case we need to go out and recruit, but we wait until we have numbers that we can rely on as opposed to early numbers that are coming in on enrollments and registrations. There are some scenarios where you have, like you're in that weird place of it's not 23, but it's not 29. Are there other supports that we can bring into that classroom short of dividing class into 2 classrooms and support that teacher with the number of students that they have? So we look at those additional aids for classrooms or other supports that would help them manage a larger class at that time. So those are the strategies we employ. Back on the timeline, when we get to looking at that seriously is in August, because that's when we finally have everybody coming back from out of town. Oh, we found a wonderful place. We're going to go move. Blah, blah. So that's.
Or they put their paperwork in because of the other school wants their transcript or whatever, so we find out that way sometimes. But the other strategy we're seeing playing out the past 2 years is we did have ESSER dollars. So we had dollars that allowed us to bring up a remote school, which actually had 5 to 8 employees, but they were hired on a 1-year only contract intentionally with COVID dollars. Then there was another infusion of ESSER dollars, but we were back, we didn't have as many people asking for remote. So we were able to do strategic class size reductions. So people got used to some of those really low numbers, 12, 13, 14. That's not the norm though, and it's not sustainable financially without those dollars. So as wonderful as those federal dollars are coming in, we did know, some publications have called that a fiscal cliff, right? There's a fiscal cliff coming towards us because that has really helped to support. But any of those people who were hired on the ESSER grant dollars were told from the time of recruitment and the time they were hired that this is likely 1 year only. Now, we always have people retire, right? So we do have some people that were able to then apply into those retirement spots. So you might see some of the same familiar faces, but the funding source would have changed. We also have some local dollars in TSSA and land trust money that school sites have some flexibility. So you may see a school hire a reading support, mom, dad, tutor, help, math support. You may see some of those kinds of people in the schools as well. And some of that does help with rotations and other strategies so that a big class size maybe isn't so big because we're actually pulling out into the different supports that the kids need. Because the other thing we recognize in our district is we have our classroom teachers. coordinators, we have our instructional coaches, we have our tech coaches, we have interventionists, we have a lot of supports that might be district funded and show up on the district roster, but they're actually providing, hands-on service to students in schools. So that's important to know too, because again, your big homeroom might feel like 25 or 26, but when you're actually dealing with the rotations of things, it's a little more manageable than that based on those supports. But this is why you're seeing kind of the red, right? You're seeing some of the red because we've lost some of those positions because we don't have that grant funding source right now. And going from 86 to 62, you probably are going to lose, a section.
Does anybody have any?
So it's just ask for patience. We know numbers are coming in. We're fully aware of those. We're watching those in control.
But registration really helps. So
Yeah.
that's
Oh,
where we
totally
do put
helps.
out that
Please- Yeah,
call
please hurry up and get.
for registration, because if a family can, we're gonna hold the kids anyway, so they're gonna get a spot, but to be registered and enrolled gives us that security and planning for those class sizes for sure. And we had, last time we checked, it was 1,700 families had not yet enrolled, which is,
It's a lot. Does anybody else have any further, do you guys have any questions
I
about?
think I'm one of those papers sitting on my kitchen
it's
island.
online, it's really easy. It's really easy. Check a box. Check a box.
Is it online? No.
Yeah, it is.
paper-
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's online, so easy. It's
And
they
there's snap
snap
that
those,
go
yeah.
Uh,
2 years ago, they like, made that it's slick as can be for parents, so.
Yeah.
So I just want to make sure, as for budget conversation, are we comfortable with wrap? I feel like we left them with a lot of smart questions and clarifications. I know that we'll
Yeah.
finalize the budget in June. Is everybody good? Thank you, guys.
Can I show you just a couple of things that you need to be aware of?
No.
No? Okay.
I'm just kidding. I just want to say it back to you. Don't make me-
Offline.
No, you're good. Yeah.
All right, close your eyes for a minute. We're gonna go towards the end.
No, please. Thank you, Mandy. Yes.
So we had talked about the RDAs. So I just wanted to have you be aware of that page. So here on about page 31, this is the impact of having one of the RDAs conclude. So there is some revenue that leaves here, leaves this fund, and will now show up in the general fund. So that's a positive. So if someone asks, what's going on? That's that story. And then food services is our other area. On my way to food services, I'll pause to say, here's a capital fund project. If there's anything, give us a quick call. But this is the $4 million we're programming on capital projects.
And you guys just worked down that list, right? It's
Yeah, we
February.
worked it. That's our list.
Okay.
On food services, the big thing that I want to call out here is that, and Mike had mentioned this earlier, the free meal program ends, so the waivers end actually on the end of June. And so what we had in federal dollars, you can see the declines here, we will not be receiving funding at that level, because essentially they were carrying the revenue piece for the district by declaring those free meals. We go back to what we used to have, so that's where you see tickets, meal sales come back into the budget. So there's a very conscious shift, and that's because the waivers are ending. But we're on this one, this is probably a wobbly budget.
Okay.
We don't know what the return to the kitchens will be after the families understand that the free meals have ended. And if you don't qualify for free or reduced lunch or breakfast, are you going to still come to our kitchen and participate? So it's a little soft right now. And it's, we do want to encourage that we have great meals. It's a great opportunity. They've spent 2 years with us getting it at no cost. So they know the quality of what's there. We're still putting the capital infrastructure in place to stretch into scratch cooking and healthier meals and the district has done in the past. So hopefully we can keep the messaging up. So keep the word up, but it does significantly change the financial picture of food services.
That's
Well, and
certainly,
PCOP.
that's another equity principle you could be thinking about though as a long-term strategy. There are districts that do just pay for student lunches. I mean, that's something that's a very, you don't want any child to go hungry, no matter their age. You want them to be able to go and get a meal, but again, there's a cost to it. There's a very real cost and worthy of conversation maybe in the future as a long-term plan. But it is something I've seen in other districts.
Yeah, and there's federal encouragement. And I think the state legislature passed a law this last year that breakfast has to be offered at every school. So whether it's at no cost to the family or no, could be the question, because we're already having to provide that under state statutes. So, so you can work your way into it and see how it goes. That's.
And then you want to remind the board of there is always a percentage that is a pass-through because of the different recapture formulas.
Oh, yes.
All
Just so
right.
that we know.
Where the money really disappears
That's
to.
where we put a budget out there, but we don't actually get that much.
All right, so here's, see if I can give you the pieces. So here we see a number. This is the basic levy, $2.7 million of additional money coming from the basic levy. That's the levy set by the state legislature that every school district imposes. It will generate $2.7 million. However, we do not get to keep all of the 2.7. Our recapture calculation is based on our enrollments that generate WPU, and it creates an entitlement of WP dollars. So grew by 2.7, and we will give back 1.69 or 1.6 million of that. So that's it's great to have WPU increases when it's all funded by the basic levy, not so great. So, but that's the way it's working right now. So we're anticipating a recapture payment somewhere in the 14.7, probably move up to $15 million this next school year, coming out of the basic levy.
15 million.
Right, so it looks like we're growing so exponentially, it's really not accurate, right?
Yeah,
It's
if you look at the revenue by itself, you get, oh, they have plenty of money. It's like, well, we don't get to keep all of that.
So but when you look at the poverty rates of the districts getting those dollars, you have an understanding and appreciation of that recapture formula. It's just hard to explain locally why your local dollars are, kind of disappearing. But back when Park City was, or we actually received recapture back when, right? So things do change in different communities. But so if you did walk into some of those schools, so you would be appreciative of the fact that there is that formula to try to keep, a level of education throughout the state.
Have we confirmed that money that gets recaptured doesn't, I remember a few years ago, we were talking about it being stuck in an account and not actually being distributed.
Yeah,
No, so
Is it,
it's
that changed,
is.
improved?
It is technically deposited into what's called the Uniform School Fund.
Okay,
And that fund was used every year to balance the state budget. So it doesn't go into some corner and get forgotten or left behind. It was a fundamental piece of funding education. With the passage of Amendment G to the Constitution, a portion of that change has all of the public education money now deposited into the Uniform School Fund. So instead of being this little piece of money that has recapture in it, it now has the whole state budget running through it. So it is picked up and
okay.
is distributed, just not to us.
It's not to us.
Yeah.
Not to us. All right. Good with budget talk. So I will move to public comment now. Do you guys, Josh, do either one of you still have comments that want to come up, or were your questions answered?
That's still open comment, if okay.
Perfect, yeah, so. You too, okay. So I'll just read, the Board of Education wants to hear live input from the community members at our meetings. In order to respect, preserve the time allotted to each partner on the agenda. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes. If you wish to address the board, please read, we have that, and we'll have you come up and please state your name clearly for the record. The Board of Education expects that all public comments will be polite, respectful, and accurate. Please refrain from specifically identifying personnel. Personnel issues are not appropriate for public comment. Therefore, such comments will not be allowed. So, Chris Choi at the top of my head. So if you want to join us, come up.
Thank you. So my comments relate to the survey that was issued by PCSD stakeholders and the results that came back in from that. I know that you all received the results because I hit the send button myself. So Andrew, I was actually really glad to hear you key in on the DEI position, because there are 4 positions that total $945,000 that are all admin level positions. And the overwhelming feedback that came back from the survey results was that the district is already top heavy, and teachers and staff really need more boots on the ground. So that is primarily what I came here to say. Just concern about that much money being added at that top level, while there's already such a degree of concern about the district being top heavy.
Perfect, thank you. Josh.
My name is Josh Mann, and thank you for the time. I first was going to address something Todd brought up, and I'll claim a lot of responsibility for the emails you've been receiving about class sizes and such. And I just wanted to explain that. I'll tie it all into the budget here in a second. Through my park rag, I often get emails from people. I don't make stuff up. There's a significant concern from teachers that their classes are going to be large next year. And I've heard from more than a handful of teachers who also communicate on behalf of their principals that they're worried about those class sizes. They'll say things like, I have 31 kids in my class this year. And from everything they know, they'll have 31 next year. And they think it's untenable. And they believe that they've talked to the district office and that they're not getting a response. So that's when they've reached out to me and said, please reach out to the parents, because they're the ones that are going to be impacted. And so I think that's where you're getting those comments from, are the parents who are worried because the teachers are worried. And I think the main concerns with parents are, and a lot of it's the non-DOI. And they see the DOI are frozen by state level. And the non-DOI classes become large, and they become large as you get older. I think my son's 5th grade class next year will probably have 28 kids in it, unless something's done by it. And if somebody moves in, it'll be more. And I can tell you from my experience, those are much harder classes. The non-DLI classes, at least in my experience, there's a lot of issues for teachers. It could be different at other places, but in my experience. So I bring it through that lens of, we need to keep class sizes low. And I think if the district could guarantee parents that classes, a non-DLI won't have any more than DLI, and you're shooting for 24 in a class, I think your issues to be resolved with that. I think people expect that. To do that, I think we need to take a hard look at the budget. And specifically, I look at a couple of things I see on there. One is the admin portion that's increasing by about $345,000. And I understand that's both principals, assistant principals, and district office. When I've looked at it since 2018 to now, administrative positions have increased, the total funding for administration positions has increased 44% since 2018. Teacher salaries has increased 11%. And what I mean by that is I'm looking at central services salaries, which is section 2005-133 has those increases. You compare that to teacher salaries, which are lower. So I guess it gets back.
It's not accurate. So a couple things, just to address them one by one, if you have more time.
That's, fine.
But first of all, the attendance and the class sizes is not just something that we're paying attention to. It's something that's independently audited every year, and it's required by law to be done so, right? So to say that the classes are larger than the numbers that we're giving, it's not just listening to us and believing that we're not intentionally lying to you. It's also something that's audited as fact, right? So, I've been doing this a while. I don't recall a situation where we had an elementary class size of 30 kids, despite the fact that that's the norm elsewhere in the state. Our community's spoken very clearly that they want lower sizes. And we've put these guidelines in of 23 kids in elementary school classes to meet that community desire, right? And that is pretty good. And the other part of it, I'd say, is that the non-DLA classes, if you looked at Todd's numbers here, pretty typical of Jeremy, they're actually going to be lower than the DLI classes, right? So that's another, issue. What I'd say about, and I've been involved in a lot of these salary negotiations, the teacher salaries have gone up considerably, a lot more than 11% since in 2 years. And we've done a 3-year contract that was up. I want to say the last one was up maybe 15%. Is that right, Todd? And then this one probably around the same over 4 years. So compounded, that's considerably more than 11%, right? So
Sorry to interrupt, but I was talking in aggregate. If you look at the bottom line numbers of total spent on teacher salaries and you look at those numbers, so I think that's what my numbers.
And that's without including other salary increases such as ESSA money and things like that that come from the federal government, as Jill just talked about, which are millions of dollars a year that they've given us that we pass through to teachers. So, I think we're all very conscious of the rate of increase for all of our employees. And we try, every few years when we have these negotiations, not only do we focus on that, the administration compensation in relation to teachers, in relation to our classified, but also those unions, and, you've been part of some of those negotiations, there's conversations between them, right? So, a lot of the time, the teachers union or the teachers negotiating group will go first and set that benchmark. And then we use that benchmark as a guide when we're looking at our other employees, right? Of our 800 employees, there's only 180 licensed, something like that. And so it's actually the vast minority of our overall group, or maybe it's 200, but we use that as the benchmark every time. And that's by design, right? Because we don't want to have a situation where certain groups are left behind, or that we're advantaging, certain employees versus others. And to their credit, the various groups, whether it's PCCEA, whether it's PCEA, whether it's admin, and admin tend to be the most selfless because they wait till the very end and see what's left over. Those groups help themselves out, they help each other out, and they care about each other. And it's a pleasure to deal with the negotiating groups because of that. So I don't want, I know you're running for office, and I know you want to put out an agenda here and show that you're looking at the numbers, and I appreciate that. But you also have a responsibility to make sure that you're not riling people up with a false narrative. And the idea that Jeremy Ranch is going to have classes with over 30 kids, or any other elementary school for that matter, it's not going to happen. And if we get to August, we have a class where it's big, we'll find another teacher, we'll pull an aide, or we'll do something, and it happens every summer. The good news is that this time around, and over the last 2 or 3 years, we've actually requested the registrations now. Before, it used to be only in August. You remember this because you've been here, right? That the registrations wouldn't come until August or September, and then we were caught flat-footed because every other district was hired. In this case, Shad knows how many more teachers we have to get, right? He has another 24 teachers, which is, it's kind of our, if we have 10, 15% turnover, that's kind of been the norm, unfortunately. And it's low for Utah, low for nationwide educators, but it's still a high number. and that's even when you take out the natural turnover that occurs from our DLI teachers. So it's a tough game to keep this place staffed. And I think our guys do a pretty good job at that. So, but I would say you don't have to be anxious about your fifth grader being in a class with 35 kids because it never happens.
Yeah. Well, that's fair. And I didn't mean to imply that you were lying or anything like that. I think the whole purpose of it is to say, just don't let it happen. And it sounds like, Andrew, you're saying there won't be a class with 30 kids in it in elementary school. And I think that's cool. It'd be better if you'd say there won't be a class with more than 24 kids too. But
well, we can't. We have guidelines, and we can't. There's also state statute that in theory says, if the state auditor comes here and looks at the amount of teaching space, they can in theory mandate us to have more than what our class sizes want to be, right? So our community says we want no more than 23. Well, according to state statute, you can fit over 30 kids in every classroom. Kids they're like, well, the kids are little, you put them in there. Well, that's not what our community wants. And so we're constantly fighting that battle, and we look at our classes, what's teachable space, right? How many kids can we have in our buildings, all of that stuff. How many different programs are we offering? And, the combination of the amount of programming that we offer and courses that are not core, like art and music, and science, is, means that, we have that flexibility. So it's the administration does a really good job ensuring that that's not the case.
Perfect. Can I make a couple more points quickly?
Yeah.
Is that okay? The second area I'm kind of concerned with, this maybe surprisingly, the PR position. I guess what I would say about that is I'm the person who would argue that we need great communications, but I think you can get that PR for free. By that, I mean, I would, and I know a lot of the history, but I would begin talking to KPCW again. Dr. Gilday, Todd, a member of the school board, I would go on and take advantage once or twice a month and go talk to KPCW, write to the town lift. Maybe you could do a monthly thing on the town lift. I don't know if the park record's covering education anymore, but I think you could take advantage of this communication that isn't happening now. You could save that $220,000 at least this year. And it sounds like it's 120 for a communications person, another 100,000 for other things, but you could save that money. You could spend it on 2 teachers and an aide. And that would be a much better use this first year. So I would just encourage you all to talk to the media more, because they're going to ask hard questions, but it's going to be it's going to serve the community the best, because that's where the community listens. Most people aren't listening to this meeting here. They're not reading the budgetary documents, but they'll listen to KPCF. Sorry, Todd. So that's my second point. My last question was, I didn't understand something, which is, it looked like on substitute teachers, I think Andrew, you said, we're trying to spend more on it, but it looked like the budget was cut 22%. This year, the proposed budget was 390 versus about 500,000 on substitutes.
Some of that is COVID related as well. You're not anticipating that you're going to have as many absences. So the typical number used to be about 360.
Okay.
So kind of getting back to what's normal.
I would have thought that in previous years, because we knew that people would be sick and we didn't want them forced to come to work.
And are we sticking with edu staff for the substitute for now, or is that as of now what it is?
As of now.
Yeah, so we're in the contract. Okay. And how long does that contract go? Do you know off the top?
3 years.
3 years with
2 1-year renewals.
yeah, 1 year reviews.
Okay. All right. Hey, thank you guys for the time, and please do talk to the media. It'll be easier than spending the money, I guarantee it. Thank you.
All right, policies for posting. Can I please get a motion to post policy 11010, school district property rental and fee schedule?
I make a motion to post policies as stated.
Second.
Any discussion?
No.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, policies for adoption. Can I please get a motion to adopt policy 1002, fraud hotline, new policy 2010, eligibility and qualifications for board members, policy 9080, graduation requirements, and policy
10060, conduct on school bus.
I make a motion to adopt policies as stated.
Second.
Perfect. Any discussion?
Do we have any
Did we have-
feedback and
yeah.
posting?
I think the only one we had feedback on was the graduation requirements when Shannon spoke to us last year. My understanding is we are taking her considerations and keeping those for the current and phasing those out as we move forward. Am I correct on that?
Yes, we're hoping to go more towards something where the student will have an acknowledgement or recognition of their high academic attainment, but not necessarily have to make an application to do that, because the application could be considered a barrier for families that don't hear about it. But if the student achieves that GPA, shouldn't they be recognized with, whatever the magna cum laude, super cum laude sort of recognition? So we would like to remove that barrier of the application part and just let the computer, generate the GPA and give them the designation.
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, that's unanimous. All right, can I please make a motion to adjourn until our next regular session meeting on Tuesday, June 21st at 4 p.m. 4 p.m.
I make a motion to adjourn till our next meeting. Thank you.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
see you guys next month. All right.
See you. Sorrento.
I think I'm back.
Oh, you
Actually, I think I get back.